It is an invitation for the EU to push and push, to control more and more things, and for the UK to get angry about it, just as we did when we were a member.
We now know about Boris Johnson's Brexit thoughts on what's going to happen later on. He is going to vote against the Stormont break, which is Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal. MPs will be voting on part of the Windsor Agreement that includes that mechanism, and it has caused some upset for the DUP. It aims to give the Northern Ireland Assembly a greater say on how EU laws apply to Northern Ireland. But critics say it's practically useless. One of them is Sir John Redwood, former minister and member of the European Research Group, and he joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you with us. Well, let's just start off with that vote on the Stormont break, because this morning we have heard that Boris Johnson is going to vote against it. Does that change things, do you think, for some Conservative MPs? Does it make some more likely to vote against it too, along with him?
Well, it may do, because he obviously knew a lot about these negotiations, because he had to try and rescue the very poor negotiation that Theresa May had conducted. But I think more importantly will be the MPs focusing on this issue after many other noises off about other subjects. And I hope they're all focusing on it overnight and this morning, because the ERG did produce some extremely important legal advice, which was published yesterday. And I would recommend all MPs read that before voting on it, because it gives a rather different portrait of how this agreement might operate in practice from some of the other more bullish interpretations we've been hearing from the government.
Well, let's go through that objection, that list of objections, because the fundamentals here are that the concern is that the Stormont break, which is designed to give Northern Ireland a say in which rules, which European rules, new European rules and regulations, or any changes to existing rules, designed to give Northern Ireland a say over which of those apply. Now, the problem, as I understand it, is that ultimately the power to disapply those rules will rest in Westminster, even though there is an obligation on politicians in Westminster to halt it and then to essentially trigger this break process. Is that the biggest problem for you?
No, of course not. I mean, the biggest problem is that the EU will be imposing laws and rules not just on Northern Ireland, but the whole United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom Parliament cannot initiate this process, so Stormont isn't in session. Or isn't meeting at all, you could never exercise the break. The second problem is the break doesn't apply to all the important issues. For example, the EU wishes to influence or control our state aid policy, and that is exempted from the functioning of the break. The third issue is that the tests for applying the break by the United Kingdom Parliament on the advice of the Assembly at Stormont are so high that I cannot actually see any likely government establishment in the United Kingdom ever thinking they could apply the break. I don't think the break is actually linked to the driving wheels of the EU legal machine.
Well, those stipulations that you've just laid out there go far further than some of the concerns that the DUP has raised about this break. And the UK government's pushback is that actually the conditions for using it are not, as you say, incredibly high bar. They can include, an impact on the citizens of Northern Ireland. They are not set out in law. They can be argued for. So the UK government would say, well, actually, there is far more control here than what you're making out.
Well, I don't agree. And that's where the legal advice that's been published, I think, is extremely important. We haven't had alternative legal advice from the government. I've been asking the government to set out its case because I'm a government-supporting MP who normally likes to obey the Conservative whip. But I don't see how I can in this situation because, for example, the government has refused to answer my question, which EU laws will still apply in Northern Ireland. They have refused to answer the question, which 1,700 pages of EU law or guidance is going to be removed.
Well, the answer to that is that all will continue to apply. There is a confirmatory vote in a year's time, and anything new or amended would give the opportunity in the Stormont break to be voted on. That's the answer, isn't it?
Yes, but you can't then withdraw all that EU law if you stick to the agreement. You would have to unilaterally break the agreement.
Yeah, and that's the fundamental.
There is no way out of this agreement. That's the other big downside of this thing. We had a way out of the EU through Article 50 of the treaty, which we needed to use, and we have a way out of the current protocol. And of course, we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which passed with a majority of more than 70. My recommendation to the government today is get behind your bill. The Commons wanted it. It got a good majority. Do that and you fix the problem.
There will be some people listening to you who say, for goodness sake, everybody's been arguing about this for a very long time. Everybody needs to move on. Are you being unrealistic? What would you say to those critics?
Well, I would say no. I am being true to the spirit of the vote that I and many millions of others cast to remove EU law and EU control from our country. And there will be far more going on about it and endless rows about it if we sign this agreement and if Parliament endorses the agreement. It is an invitation for the EU to push, to control more and more things, and for the UK to get angry about it, just as we did when we were a member.
So, John Redwood, in a word, you will be voting against this today. Boris Johnson will be. How many other Conservative MPs do you expect to vote against today?
Well, I've no idea. I mean, the ERG will have a meeting this morning when we'll all discuss it with each other and see whether we all agree or not. But the ERG doesn't run a whip. There's only one whip for the Conservative Party, the official Conservative whip. On this occasion, quite a lot of Conservatives who want Brexit will not be able to follow the Conservative whip.
And Boris Johnson is at the committee today. He will be questioned about whether he misled Parliament, didn't give Parliament the full picture when it came to rule breaking in Downing Street over the COVID pandemic. Do you have faith in that process?
I hope it works well. I won't be able to tell you that until I've seen the results of the process and the full process. I don't think it's helpful to provide running commentary on an inquiry into these sensitive matters. I am not providing any commentary on it, and I trust that the former Prime Minister will put forward a vigorous defence, and let's see what the committee make of it.
Do you think he's an honest man?
I think he strove very, very hard to communicate correctly with Parliament, but I'm not going to get drawn into the rights and wrongs of the issue, which are going to be settled first of all by the committee and then by parliamentary debate.
I note that's not a yes. So, John Redwood, thank you for joining us this morning.